Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Matt, and today I want to talk about dabbling in language learning. And this is something that's, I guess, very common in the language learning community, and I want to talk about it a little bit. I've talked about it in the past, but I think it's worth just kind of having a video on it. And, there's nothing necessarily wrong with dabbling in language learning, but I think that a lot of people don't necessarily know that they are dabbling, and they don't kind of realize what it really takes to reach a very high skill level or fluency in a language. So I think that with dabbling, it's not necessarily a bad or negative thing. Let's say that you just want to learn a little bit of French before you go on your vacation to France. You want to just kind of know how to get around. And you're going to do that for a little bit for this vacation. That's fine, right? Maybe you're really into language learning. You're really into languages. Maybe you're a linguist, or you do it for a living or something like that. And you want to look into some Japanese or Korean or whatever it is. That's fine too. If you just have a general interest in something, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. But I think it's worthwhile to just kind of realize the kind of downsides of dabbling and kind of realize that to get to a very high skill level in a language, it's going to take a lot of time, energy, and overcoming obstacles, challenges, and struggles. So I think that's very important because if you just look at some of the estimated hour totals from the FSI on how long it takes to get fluent in a language or to a relatively high competency level, it takes a while. And if you throw in more languages, it just is going to take you a very, very, very long time to get fluent or to a very high skill level. Maybe that's okay for you, but I do think that when people kind of imagine themselves knowing a language, they probably imagine themselves being at a high competency level, having a lot of flexibility in terms of what they're able to talk about, what they're able to do from a reading perspective, or even listen to audio content. So, just look at the hour totals, and it really becomes a simple exercise of just doing the math in your head of how long it would take you to get fluent in that language, right? If you invested an hour a day, for example. And that can be kind of a little bit of a sobering experience, but I think it's worthwhile, especially just to make sure that you don't have unrealistic expectations about language learning, and that you kind of focus in on what's important to you, because you only have so much time in a day, and when you're doing 5 languages, maybe you have a bunch of time to dedicate to language learning. Maybe you can do an hour each day to each language, but in a lot of cases, people don't want to do that. They want to put in their hour into language learning, and then they want to go on with their lives, right? They have other hobbies, they have other interests, they want to spend time with family, they want to do other things. They're just not a polyglot, they're not a crazy polyglot. They just want to learn this one language, they want to spend this much time, and that's that. And that's totally okay. You can reach a high skill level doing that. But trying to balance multiple languages, it becomes increasingly more difficult if that is indeed your objective. Like I said, sometimes there are going to be instances where people are super motivated. They are all in on language learning, and they can invest 5 hours into language learning into each of these languages. But I'm willing to kind of guess that in a lot of cases, people are probably putting inadequate time into all those languages that they are learning or they are dabbling in. It's probably not the case that they're putting in 5 hours into each language every day. So the thing about it too is that let's say that you are doing 5 hours of language learning, and the thing is, as time goes on, as you reach that third hour of study in that third language, you're going to be more tired. You're going to be more mentally drained, and the effectiveness of that time is not going to necessarily be at the same rate as the first hour. So even if you have all this time into all these languages, it's not necessarily going to equal the same level of effectiveness, especially too, where you might have to just kind of completely transition into a language that's very different. You have a different writing system, different grammar going on. That can be kind of overwhelming, where that lowers your effectiveness as well. So I think that's very important to point out. And I think a lot of this probably stems from probably the polyglot community, some of the bloggers out there where for the new year they're learning 5 or 6 languages, and maybe it kind of brings this idea that it is more feasible than it is, or there's the disclaimer, oh, I'm just kind of experiencing these languages. And in some cases, I think it gives people unrealistic expectations about language learning and dabbling. Like I said, there's nothing necessarily wrong about it, but you also have to just kind of think, once again, do the math. How competent can you really get by balancing all these languages? Do you even want to spend that time into languages? And, learning a language can be difficult and a very challenging experience. It can be very good for you though, because you're overcoming challenges, you're dealing with adversity, you're growing as a person. It's something I really like about language learning. And that can be very tough for one, right? And sometimes I think when you're looking at bloggers or people that are learning a ton of languages, it seems as though in some cases, they're just doing it for the channel. They're doing it for the polyglot aspect, this identity of it. But if you're learning one language and you're trying to reach a high level, you've probably run into obstacles where, you're getting grinded down, right? You're trying to understand grammar. It is super complicated. You're trying to speak, you're messing up, you're getting embarrassed, you're getting frustrated. People are maybe being kind of negative at your speaking. You're trying to learn more words. Audio content's a wall. You have all these challenges. It can be very difficult. And, a lot of times too, it's going to be difficult, but you push through, you keep going. You believe in yourself, you overcome that grammar, you overcome those obstacles and you get through it. But that's only with one language. Imagine now you have 5 languages that you have to overcome those kind of same obstacles, but you have different grammar, different vocabulary. You're tired after all that time investment. So, I have my hands full with just doing one language right now with Russian. So, just like I said, imagine it with 5 languages or 6 languages, and you start to kind of think, maybe this is not viable, at least getting this to a very high skill level, right? Like I said, maybe that's not your objective. You're okay with not reaching a high skill level. You just want to have these basic conversations. But in my opinion, a lot of the reward from language learning comes from getting to a higher skill level, right? You can just do so much more. You can read a lot of interesting material. You can listen to audio content, Netflix shows, play video games, have really compelling and interesting conversations beyond where's the restaurant? And that's super rewarding. And then you have a skill that you can take, elsewhere. And if you reach a very high skill level, maybe you can do something with that. But at those lower levels, I think it's a lot harder to have fun. And eventually, I think that the novelty wears off, and it gets a little bit tough. So something to, I think, just point out. So there's not necessarily anything wrong with dabbling, but once again, just we all have the same amount of time in a day, 24 hours. So, you have to ask, how feasible is it really? Obviously, there are people that all they do is language learning. Maybe they have a language learning YouTube channel. That's all they do. But even then, I think it's still difficult, right? It's only 24 hours in a day. So it's something just to kind of keep in mind with dabbling. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but I think it's important just to realize, what you're up against if you're trying to balance all these things and whether or not that's important for you to do and it's worth it for you. So that's what I had to say. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.